A mechanic friend once told me, oil doesn't kill engines. Overconfidence does. And he was right. A few years ago, after an oil change I swore I had done perfectly, I almost destroyed my car. I checked tutorials, bought the best oil and an expensive filter, but one small oversight was enough for the engine to start leaking weeks later. When I lifted the car, the drain plug had an almost invisible leak. That was the day I learned that the dumbest mistakes, the ones you make thinking you're an expert, are the ones that cost the most. And that's why today I want to tell you about the mistakes almost everyone makes after an oil change, even though they swear they did it right. Some seem insignificant, but together they can shorten your engine's life faster than you imagine. Number 12. Not checking the drain plug washer or gasket. This small piece, which many throw away without thinking, is responsible for hermetically sealing the plug. When it's not changed or reused too many times, oil starts to seep slowly. You won't notice it immediately. The drip is so slight it can take weeks to show up on the garage floor. But meanwhile, the oil level drops millimeter by millimeter. And if you don't check the dipstick, the day will come when the engine starts to sound dry, metallic, almost as if it's protesting inside. A washer costs less than a coffee, but ignoring it can mean a destroyed engine. The worst part is that many shops don't change it either. Some clean it and put it back, trusting that it will last another change. That kind of saving is the most expensive you can make. If you do the maintenance yourself, always buy a pack of new gaskets. They're cheap, but they give you the peace of mind of a perfect seal. And here's the funny part, most veteran mechanics have a little box with dozens of used washers, just in case. And they swear they still work. But if you see that a gasket is crushed, hardened, or has spiral marks, throw it away without mercy. It's easier to change a washer than to have to explain why your car left a puddle of oil in your neighbor's garage. Number 11. Changing oil with a cold engine. This mistake seems harmless, but it's one of the reasons so many engines accumulate internal dirt. When the engine is cold, old oil thickens and adheres to the walls of the oil pan, passages, and pistons. If you drain it like that, part of the contaminated oil stays inside. It's like trying to empty honey from a frozen bottle. No matter how long you wait, a sticky layer always remains. On the other hand, if you start the engine a few minutes beforehand, the oil becomes more fluid, dragging carbon particles, metallic dust, and combustion residue to the bottom. Then, when you remove the plug, almost everything comes out, taking with it the dirt you don't want to see again. It's not about bringing it to boiling point, of course. 3 or 4 minutes of idle running is enough. But doing it makes the difference between a clean engine and one that, over time, starts to have the bottom of the oil pan full of sludge. Many learn this when they open the engine and see that black paste that doesn't even look like oil anymore. And there, friend, it's too late. Plus, there's another detail almost no one mentions. When oil heats up, additives and suspended contaminants mix better, allowing them to come out with the drain. Changing it cold is leaving the dirty soup half thrown out. And if you still have doubts, try this. Drain once cold and once after warming up the engine. You'll see that the difference in color and fluidity of the used oil is abysmal. It's literally the difference between doing maintenance or simply changing one liquid for another. Number 10. Leaving the oil filter dry when installing it. This is the classic beginner's mistake, but also of many shops in a hurry. The new filter always comes completely dry, and at the moment of first start, the engine needs oil instantly. But if the filter is empty, the system takes several seconds to fill. In those seconds, the engine turns without adequate pressure and internal parts rub against each other without lubrication. It won't break immediately, but each start like this leaves a small invisible scar on the metals. Do that repeatedly and you'll have shortened the engine's lifespan without even realizing it. The solution is simple. Before installing the filter, fill it with a little new oil and lubricate the rubber gasket with the same oil. This prevents leaks and ensures the circuit has pressure from the first second. Of course, not all filters can be completely filled, especially those mounted horizontally, but even half-filling makes a big difference. And if this seems like an insignificant detail, remember that a modern engine spins thousands of times per minute. A few seconds without oil equals miles of friction. Sometimes people wonder why their engines start to sound more rough after an oil change, and the answer is right there. That first dry start that nobody mentions. Also, many confuse lubricating the gasket with bathing the filter in oil. It's not about wetting it like bread in soup, just run a finger with clean oil over the gasket. And if you ever see a mechanic install a filter without doing that step, look at him with that "I'm watching you" face, because you're witnessing the birth of a future engine noise. And we're just getting started here. Get ready, because the next mistakes are even worse, and many are made even in professional shops. They're the ones that make a car with a new engine start to lose power, vibrate more, and consume oil much sooner than expected. If you thought changing oil was a routine and risk-free process, wait until you hear what's coming. Number 9. Not checking for leaks or level after the change. Here comes into play the classic thinking of, if it's not dripping, everything's fine. Nothing could be further from the truth. After an oil change, the system needs a few minutes of operation to stabilize pressure and fill the new filter. It's at that moment when microleaks or small losses that didn't exist before can appear. If you simply get in the car and leave, you could be leaving an oil trail without realizing it. A new engine can run out of lubrication in a matter of miles if the level drops too much. The most advisable thing is to leave the car idling for a couple of minutes, turn it off, and check the dipstick. If the level dropped, refill to the exact point. And while you're at it, inspect the plug and filter. If you notice a wet shine, tighten gently or change the washer. It's incredible how many engines were ruined just because their owner didn't bend down to look at the ground. Seriously, it takes less time than checking your phone. Number 8. Tightening the plug or filter too much. This mistake has a name among mechanics: Hulk mode. And yes, we all know someone who thinks that if they tighten more, it seals better. The reality is that over-tightening only deforms the threads or breaks the gasket, causing precisely what you were trying to avoid: a leak. Plus, the drain plug is made of soft metal, and with excessive force it deforms, creating an irregular seat. Then, when you want to remove it at the next change, you'll need a breaker bar or swear in every language. In the case of the filter, tightening brutally damages the rubber and can break the casing. The rule is simple: the plug, firm but without abuse; the filter, by hand until it makes contact and then a quarter turn more. You don't need force, you need judgment. Although if you're one of those who enjoys tightening everything to the limit, at least reserve that for kitchen jar lids. Number 7. Using the wrong oil. It seems obvious, but it's probably the most common mistake of all. Many people think that any oil works as long as it looks good and says 10W40 on the label. And no, not all oils are equal. Each engine is designed with specific tolerances, and using incorrect viscosity can alter internal pressure, flow, or even sensor operation. Oil that's too thick will take time to reach the upper parts of the engine, especially in cold starts, which accelerates wear. One that's too thin will evaporate quickly or won't protect well at high temperatures. Additionally, there are synthetic, semi-synthetic, and mineral oils, and mixing them without knowing can generate foam or loss of additives. Engineers spend years calculating the ideal oil type for each engine, and then someone comes along with a supermarket deal and decides, this one's cheaper, anyway, it's the same. No, it's not the same. And if you still think it doesn't matter, remember that oil doesn't just lubricate. It also cools, cleans, seals, and protects internal engine components. Changing it for the wrong type is like giving an athlete sugar water instead of electrolyte solution. They'll run the same, but they'll end up dehydrated and exhausted. The worst part is that the damage doesn't appear instantly, but after thousands of miles, when there's no turning back. Also, at each change it's worth checking the manual or the engine cap. It says exactly what viscosity and standard the oil must meet. And watch out, don't be fooled by marketing. Just because an oil says Ultra Turbo Racing Premium doesn't mean it's better for your car. The best oil isn't the most expensive, it's the correct one. A comment to break the seriousness. If you have trouble remembering what oil your car takes, write it with a marker on the cap or on a note inside the dashboard. Believe me, it's less embarrassing than showing up at the shop with the phrase, "I don't remember, but it was a gold one with blue letters." These 3 mistakes seem simple, but they're responsible for thousands of engines with leaks, strange noises, and power loss every year. And the most ironic thing is they all come from a false sense of security. People think, I already did the change, now I'm calm. But real maintenance starts right after. The oil needs checking, the system needs adaptation, and the driver needs attention. And if you thought the most dangerous thing was using the wrong oil, wait. The following mistakes are the ones mechanics use to gain customers. Because while you think the car is at its best, they already know that over time you'll come back with an engine that sounds like it has a rock band inside. If any of these mistakes sound familiar, don't worry. We all started the same way. But subscribe and leave your like, because the ones coming can save you thousands of dollars. Number 6. Not purging the filter or checking oil pressure after the change. This is the most treacherous mistake, because it happens just when you think everything went perfect. You change the oil, tighten the filter, start the engine, and everything seems normal. But what many don't know is that in those first seconds, the system can be full of air. If the filter isn't purged correctly or if the level was low, the oil pump works in a vacuum and the engine turns without necessary pressure. That lack of pressure doesn't always trigger an alarm immediately, but every second without lubrication equals miles of wear. It's like a runner trying to sprint at full speed without having warmed up the muscles. Everything creaks, everything suffers. The trick is simple and very little known. After a change, fill the filter with oil before installing it, if the design allows, and then, when starting the engine, don't accelerate. Leave it at idle for about 30 seconds while observing the pressure light. If the indicator takes more than 5 seconds to go off, turn off the engine and check. There may be a bubble or the filter poorly sealed. Additionally, some professional mechanics do a preventive purge. They disconnect the fuel relay or ignition fuse and make the engine turn only with the starter for a few seconds. This allows the oil to rise through all galleries before the first real ignition. It seems exaggerated, but it's what separates careful mechanics from those who just change oil by routine. In a world where everyone rushes, this 1-minute step can be the difference between an engine that ages at 125,000 miles and one that reaches 300,000 without drama. Number 5. Not cleaning the cap or neck before refilling. This mistake is so common that almost nobody mentions it. Why clean? I'm going to pour new oil in anyway. Serious mistake. Every time you uncover the fill neck, especially if the car is old or if you do it outdoors, there's dust, dirt, grease, and small particles around. When you pour oil directly, all that grime falls inside the engine. It's like serving coffee in a dirty cup and believing the liquid cleans it. That dust can contain silica, sand, or metallic residue, and a single particle trapped between a piston and cylinder can scratch the surface. Also, dirt mixes with new oil and shortens its lifespan, oxidizing it faster. The correct thing is to wipe a clean cloth over the cap and neck edge before opening, and keep the funnel covered when not using it. Even an old microfiber cloth can shed lint, so choose one that doesn't leave residue. And if you want shop advice, never use the same funnel for new oil and for refilling coolant or brake fluid. It seems obvious, but more than one engine ended up with an unexpected additive just from carelessness. It's such an absurd mistake it seems like a joke, but it happens. If you don't believe it, ask any mechanic. There's always a customer who filled their engine with oil mixed with whatever they found in the garage. Number 4. Forgetting to reset the oil life monitor. This is the most invisible mistake of all, and it doesn't have to do with the engine itself, but with the driver's mind. Many modern cars have a system that calculates oil life based on driving style, temperature, time, and mileage. But if you do the change and don't reset that counter, the car will continue believing it has old oil. Sometimes the maintenance light comes on a few days after the change and the owner gets scared, thinking something's wrong. Or, worse yet, completely ignores it thinking it's a dashboard malfunction. The problem is that this confusion causes two consequences. Some change oil before time, wasting money. Others let it go, relying on a calculation that no longer corresponds. Additionally, the monitoring system also helps the engine computer adjust operating parameters according to current oil viscosity and quality. If you don't restart it, the engine keeps operating under previous values. In summary, even though you put the best oil on the market, the car still thinks it's running with used oil. The procedure to reset it varies by model, but is usually done from the dashboard, with a combination of buttons or by holding down the accelerator or brake pedal while the ignition is on. It costs nothing, but few do it. And of course, shops love it. Every distracted customer who returns, because the light won't go off, is an opportunity to charge an extra checkup. There are drivers who worry more about restarting their phone than resetting the oil monitor. If the car could talk, it would probably say, "Hey, you changed my oil 3 weeks ago. Do you plan to tell me, or should I wait for the engine to blow?" And the most curious thing is that all are easy to avoid. Just a few extra minutes, a clean cloth, and a little attention. However, few do them. Maybe because they're tasks that don't shine, that aren't seen on social media or make you feel like an expert. But they're the ones that make the difference between a car that ages with dignity and one that becomes junk before its time. But the worst is yet to come. The most common mistake is also the most deadly. It's the one everyone commits daily without knowing it, and it's the one that leaves shops the most money. And yes, you've probably done it more than once too. Number 3. Not checking the level on a flat surface. Seems silly, right? Well, this mistake takes thousands of engines every year. Checking oil level on an inclined surface gives a false reading, and the worst part is nobody realizes it. If you do it on a slope, oil accumulates at one end of the pan and the dipstick shows you a deceptive level. Either it looks like you have too much, or it looks like you're missing some. In the first case, you could leave it like that and end up with excess, which generates foam and overpressure. In the second, you'll add unnecessary oil, and the engine will end up struggling to breathe through lubricant bubbles. The result is the same. The oil pump stops working correctly, and the system fills with air instead of oil. That destroys bearings, raises temperature, and ends up affecting hydraulic lifters. The worst part is everything seems normal, until the car starts to sound like an old blender. The correct procedure is simple. Park the car on flat ground, let it rest a few minutes for oil to drop completely to the pan, and then measure. And please, use the dipstick. Yes, that forgotten metal thing many confuse with an engine ornament. There's no electronic sensor that replaces the precision of a manual check. There are drivers who check oil with the car running, others who don't even clean the dipstick before measuring, and the bravest do it with the car on an incline. If your mechanic sees you doing that, they'll probably look at you like someone watching someone measure fever with a kitchen thermometer. Number 2. Mixing different types or brands of oil. This mistake is the automotive equivalent of mixing wine with soda. Nobody recommends it, but some do it. The problem isn't just viscosity, but chemistry. Each oil has its own formulation of additives, detergents, antioxidants, dispersants, and anti-foaming agents. And although they all seem similar, combinations can react with each other. The result, oil loses stability, foam forms, residue generates, and lubrication becomes inconsistent. And no, it's not an exaggeration. When you mix oils with different bases, for example, one semi-synthetic with one mineral or full synthetic, you change the evaporation point and the oil's ability to withstand heat. Some additives even cancel each other out, like those friends who can't be in the same room. Imagine one of the oils has more aggressive cleaning additives. When mixed with another, they can dissolve old sludge too quickly, clogging channels or filters. And if that happens right after a change, the engine can be left without lubrication for critical seconds. And why do people do it? Because they see a quart of another brand on sale and think, anyway, it's the same SAE number. But no, viscosity isn't everything. The base also counts, the quality of the additive package, and manufacturer certifications. The correct thing is to always use the same brand and type, or empty and refill completely if you need to change lines. Mixing oils is playing Russian roulette with the engine. For skeptics who still doubt, think that oil laboratories spend millions designing balanced formulas. If it were as simple as mixing two brands, universal oil would already exist and we'd all be happy. But no. In mechanics, the cheap and improvised almost always turns out expensive. Number 1. Starting and leaving immediately without letting oil circulate. This is the worst mistake of all, and the most common. The silent killer of the modern engine. Millions of drivers commit it every morning, convinced that the car is fine, just start and go. But the reality is brutal. The first seconds after ignition are the most dangerous in the engine's life. When you turn off the vehicle, oil settles in the pan. When you start it, the pump needs several seconds to repressurize the system and distribute lubricant through all parts. If in that span you put it in first and take off in a hurry, you're leaving the engine working without protection. Pistons rub the cylinder, bearings spin almost dry, and valves suffer micro-frictions that shorten their lifespan. And here's the detail few know, that damage doesn't repair itself. There's no additive, expensive oil, or frequent change that erases micro-scratches generated by cold friction. It's cumulative wear, invisible at first, but one day translates into a noisy engine, with low compression and excessive oil consumption. The ideal is to start, wait between 15 and 30 seconds, and then move smoothly until temperature starts to rise. You don't need to leave the car running 10 minutes like in the 90s. Modern engines don't need it. Just a brief margin for oil to flow and parts to reach minimum operating temperature. And please, avoid revving when starting. There's nothing more absurd than watching someone start their car, step on the accelerator like it's a race car, and then complain that the engine sounds weird. If you do that, you're not warming up the engine, you're punishing it. Most engines don't die of old age, they die of bad habits. It's not the mileage, or the age, or even the brand, it's the neglect. And the ironic thing is that none of these mistakes costs money to avoid. Checking the level costs 5 minutes. Using the correct oil costs the same as using a bad one. Waiting 20 seconds before driving costs nothing. But repairing a damaged engine costs the same as buying a new car. So, before blaming the brand, the mechanic, or fate, look at your habits. If you correct just these last 3 sins, your car could last twice as long. And if you add up the 12 mistakes you learned in this video, you're practically armoring your engine. You don't need to be a mechanic or engineer. Just pay attention and have a little common sense. Or as that old mechanic who taught me almost all this would say, the best oil in the world doesn't work if the person changing it doesn't have a brain. And you know, if you want your engine to outlive your car, subscribe, leave your like, and comment. Tell me which of these mistakes you were making without knowing it, or which you learned to avoid. Maybe your comment will save the engine of someone who's about to make the same mistake you already overcame. Because sometimes, good advice at the right time is worth more than an oil change.